Big news from the NFL Draft. Round 1 is done, and now all eyes are on what's next for the Las Vegas Raiders. As we move into Day 2, the second and third rounds are about to shake things up. That's when teams start making bold moves, and the Raiders could be one of them. Trades are coming, surprises are guaranteed, and one name has everyone talking: Shedeur Sanders. This quarterback is creating serious buzz. Some people love him, others doubt him, but he's still one of the most talked-about players left on the board. Before we dive deeper into the latest news, subscribe to the channel, like it, and don't forget to press the bell icon. Let's move on to the new news. Now, if the Browns don't grab Sanders with their next pick, the Raiders need to think fast. This could be their chance to take a talented quarterback and let him grow behind the scenes. Just like the Chiefs did with Mahomes, or the Packers did for years, the Raiders could draft Sanders and give him time to learn the game instead of throwing him in right away. Yes, Las Vegas could go after a wide receiver, a guard, or even a defensive lineman, but finding and developing the right quarterback? That could change everything for the future of this team. If Shedeur Sanders is still available, the Raiders should seriously think about grabbing him. But let's be real, he might not help the team win right away. That's why the Raiders also need to look at players who can step in and make an impact right now. Let's talk wide receivers. There are a few names the Raiders must have on their radar, and one of them is Burton. Before the 2024 season, Burton was considered the top prospect by pro scouts. So what happened? Why is he still available? It's a bit of a mystery because this guy had a strong year. Maybe it's because he's not built like your typical wide receiver. He's more like a hybrid. Think of someone who plays like a wide receiver but runs like a running back. Now, here's why that matters for the Raiders. They don't need a standard receiver. They already have Brock Bowers, who can play the big man role. Pairing him with a dynamic, move-everywhere player like Burton could give Las Vegas one of the most creative offenses in the league. Burton doesn't have the cleanest routes, but he breaks tackles like crazy, and he did it in one of the toughest college football conferences, the SEC. He's a threat in motion, on jet sweeps, or even catching short passes and turning them into long gains. If the Raiders pick him in the early second round, they'd be landing a true playmaker. And after missing out on explosive talent in the past, this could be their chance to finally get that game changer on offense. Let's keep looking at wide receivers the Raiders should keep their eyes on. Two more names stand out: Isaiah Bond and Kyle Williams. These two bring very different skills to the table, and both could be valuable additions for Las Vegas. Starting with Kyle Williams out of Washington State. He's not the biggest guy on the field, but he's one of the smoothest route runners in this class. While Burton is known for his explosive plays, Kyle is more about precision. He creates space with quick, sharp movements that remind you a little of Davante Adams, especially in those first few steps off the line. And that's something the Raiders desperately need: receivers who can separate and move the chains. Then there's Isaiah Bond, the speedster. He brings electricity to the field. Yes, the Raiders already have Trey Tucker, but Bond might have even more upside. He's fast, explosive, and fearless after the catch. While Tucker has shown potential, Bond looks like a player who could grow into something special with the right coaching. Now, remember this: just because these players might fall into the second round doesn't mean they aren't great. Smart teams find starters in the second and even third round. The draft is deep this year, especially at wide receiver. If the Raiders play it right, they could come out of Day 2 with a game-changing weapon. If the Raiders want to make a real impact in the second round, there's one wide receiver with massive upside: Isaiah Bond. He's not just fast, he's a game breaker. If the coaching staff knows how to unlock his speed, he could become a major weapon. We've seen what players like this can do when used the right way. But the Raiders aren't only in the market for wide receivers. There are other needs, and two top defensive backs could be incredible steals: Shavon Revel Jr. and Will Johnson. Let's focus on Will Johnson for a moment. This guy was once seen as a top 5 overall talent. He's physical, confident, and can lock down almost any receiver, but injuries held him back, specifically a turf toe issue. Because of that, his performance during workouts wasn't elite. He looked a bit stiff, and some scouts backed off. But here's where it gets interesting for the Raiders. Johnson tried to prove himself even while hurt. That says a lot about his toughness and commitment. If healthy, he could easily be the best cornerback in this entire draft class. Just think about what happened last year. Quinyon Mitchell slipped in the draft, and yet he had a breakout rookie season. Will Johnson could follow that same path. For the Raiders, this could be the perfect time to grab a high-upside corner who just needs the right support and recovery time. If the Raiders have a chance to grab Will Johnson, they should jump on it, even if it means trading up. Yes, he's been dealing with a turf toe injury, but talent like his doesn't come around often. When healthy, Johnson has the tools to shut down any wide receiver in the NFL. He's aggressive, instinctive, and has that lockdown mentality every team wants in a top corner. Now, let's shift focus to another underrated gem, Shavon Rivell Jr. He's not coming from a powerhouse program, but don't let that fool you. His athleticism speaks volumes, ranking third best among all corners in the draft. Even after an ACL tear, his explosion and coverage ability stand out. For a team like the Raiders, who need future stars in the secondary, Rivell could be a hidden treasure waiting to shine. He might even be available in the third round, a potential steal. On the defensive line, one name deserves serious attention: Dion Walker. He's a beast in the trenches. Massive frame, surprising agility, and most importantly, he knows how to wreck run plays. If the Raiders want to stop teams like the Chiefs and Chargers, they need someone like Walker to shut down the run game early. What sets Walker apart is that he's not just a space eater. He has pass-rushing flashes that make him unique for his size. Compared to someone like Adam Butler or even Christian Wilkins, Walker brings a totally different flavor: raw strength and disruptive power. The Raiders' path to dominance isn't just about rushing the quarterback. They need to build a wall against the run, and that's where Dion Walker fits in: strong, smart, and built to anchor the middle of the line. The Raiders have some serious decisions to make in the trenches, especially when it comes to the run defense. One name flying under the radar is Cam Jackson, a massive force at 6'6" and 330 pounds. Even though he played limited snaps at Florida, he made every one of them count. His performance at the Senior Bowl turned heads, showing that he's not just big. He's smart, quick, and uses his size to win battles. Jackson's length and leverage make him a natural run stuffer, but don't sleep on his pass rush. He's got underrated moves and a motor that can collapse pockets. Honestly, his tape shows more disruption than some of the higher-ranked guys from last year. If the Raiders want a monster in the middle, Jackson could be the guy, even if he slides into the third round. Now, let's talk about the edge. Malcolm Coons has 1 year left on his contract, and the reality is, the Raiders may not bring him back. It's tough, but decisions like this are what shape the future. With players like Trayvon Moehrig and Nate Hobbs also nearing contract decisions, the Raiders need to start investing in the next wave of pass rushers. That's where the draft comes in. There are edge rushers out there right now with day one potential, and the Raiders can't afford to miss. One name to watch is Mike Green, an explosive player who could thrive in the right system. Off-field issues have clouded his path, but strictly from a football perspective, his talent is undeniable. If the Raiders feel confident in his character, he could be a diamond in the rough. With Coons likely on the way out and uncertainty around how quickly Tyree Wilson will develop, the Raiders need to strike early on a defensive lineman or edge rusher. This draft is loaded with physical freaks, and if Las Vegas picks wisely, they could reload their defense with hungry, young talent built to dominate in the AFC West. There's always one name in the draft that's surrounded by mystery. For the Raiders, that name might be Mike Green. From a pure football standpoint, he's electric, explosive off the snap, violent with his hands, and relentless in pursuit. When you watch his film, you see flashes of Max Crosby, and that's not a comparison we throw around lightly. Green's hand technique, footwork, and motor scream high-end pass rusher. He's got moves, swim, rip, cross-chop, you name it. He doesn't just play the edge, he owns it. Some teams may hesitate due to off-the-field concerns, but if the Raiders are willing to take a calculated risk, this guy could be a game-changer. Even as a second-round pick, he'd be worth the investment. But Green isn't the only edge defender that should be on the Raiders' radar. Donovan Ezeruaku, out of Boston College, is another promising prospect. He's not the biggest guy, just under 6 feet 3 inches, but he brings burst, bend, and some crafty pass rush tricks to the table. He fakes inside, swipes outside, and knows how to bend around the edge. He might not be a second-round lock, but in the third round, he'd be a steal. And if we're digging deeper, don't forget J.T. Tuimoloau from Ohio State. He's built like a tank and plays with that Big Ten toughness. He may not be as refined as others, but his ceiling is sky-high with the right coaching. Bottom line, the Raiders need fresh energy on the edge. Whether it's a high-upside gamble like Mike Green or a technician like Ezeruaku, now is the time to reload. The AFC West doesn't wait, and neither should Vegas. One name that should absolutely be on the Raiders' radar is Landon Jackson, and not just because he's talented, but because of who he models his game after, Max Crosby. When a young pass rusher studies every move of one of the NFL's best edge defenders, you take notice. Jackson is hungry. He's driven, and he's exactly the kind of player Vegas needs in the locker room. At 6 feet 6 inches, Jackson isn't the fastest off the snap, but what he lacks in explosion, he makes up for in football IQ. His awareness, ability to read plays, and adjust mid-rush are impressive. Pair him with Crosby, and you might just have one of the smartest and most relentless edge duos in the league. And let's be real, Malcolm Coons might not be with the Raiders next season, and questions still linger about Tyree Wilson's long-term ceiling. That's why someone like Jackson, who plays with a high motor and sharp instincts, could be the perfect complement to Max Crosby. Now, let's talk about Braden Swinson out of LSU. This guy is one of the most overlooked edge rushers in the entire draft. While names like Mike Green and James Pierce are making headlines, Swinson is flying under the radar. But don't let that fool you. His pass rush ability is legit. He's quick, flexible, and knows how to win with leverage. If you're the Raiders, this is the kind of pick that could turn into a steal. Quiet now, but dangerous later. Swinson has that surprise breakout star vibe all over him. Bottom line, the Raiders don't just need bodies on the edge, they need impact players. And between Jackson's mindset and Swinson's untapped potential, the Silver and Black could walk away from the draft with real difference makers. Braden Swinson. That's the name Raiders fans should be talking about, loudly. At 6 feet 4 inches with advanced pass rush skills, Swinson is one of the most technically sound edge rushers still on the board. While Mike Green might have the flash, Swinson isn't far behind. His hand usage, footwork, and instincts are refined, something you don't always see in a young prospect. If the Raiders are serious about building a dangerous pass rush, Swinson could be a key piece. He's not just potential. He's production waiting to happen. In a draft class loaded with talent on the edge, there are maybe a dozen guys who'll develop into legit sack artists. Swinson, he's going to be one of them. Now, let's shift gears to the offensive line, a spot where the Raiders need to get stronger and deeper. One name stands out: Jaylen Rivers. He's big, he's powerful, and he's NFL ready. Originally a left tackle at Miami, Rivers transitioned to guard at the Senior Bowl, and he dominated. At 6 feet 6 inches, 320 pounds with nearly 35-inch arms, this guy isn't just a guard. He could probably slide to right tackle if needed. What makes Rivers so intriguing is that he's not just a maybe. He's a now. If the Raiders take him, you can plug him in at guard from day one and expect him to anchor that interior line with strength and confidence. Guards often fall further in the draft than they should, but if Rivers is still available in the second or even third round, the Raiders should waste no time. Imagine walking away from the draft with a high IQ pass rusher like Swinson and a rock-solid interior lineman like Rivers. That's how you reshape both sides of the ball. The third round could be a goldmine for the Raiders. A few names stand out here, and one I'd be especially excited about is Tate Ratledge. This guy has incredible tape, and he's a day-one starter for any NFL team. For the Raiders, he's the kind of player who could step in at left guard immediately. Even though Ratledge primarily played right guard in college, flipping him over is no problem. It's all about the mental reps, and Tate's got the IQ to adapt quickly. Another intriguing option is Anthony Bolin. Standing at 6 feet 6 inches, 336 pounds, this guy moves incredibly well for his size. His upside is through the roof, and with the right coaching he could become an elite player. Some might see him as a future right tackle, but I think he'll make his mark as a guard in the NFL. For the Raiders, he's a solid second-round option, but don't be surprised if he falls to the third. If he's still available at that point, the Raiders should pounce. Charles Grant is another name worth watching. He might be a perfect fit for the Raiders, and with their interest in him, the third round could be the sweet spot to take him. Adding a player like Grant would boost the defense significantly, and the Raiders need to continue adding talented prospects like him. Now, let's talk about offensive tackles. In the second round, it might not make the most sense to replace DJ Glaze with a new tackle. But then again, would the Raiders consider making a bold move there? Remember, teams like the Buccaneers have drafted offensive tackles in the second round with great success. Cody Mock, who was drafted by the Buccaneers, started his rookie year at right tackle and later moved to guard. The Raiders might see a similar opportunity, but only time will tell if they go down that road. With a few key picks in the third and second rounds, the Raiders have the chance to make immediate improvements to both sides of the ball. This draft could be huge for their future. Let's talk about Charles Grant for a moment. If the Raiders bring him in, I believe he'll play guard. I'd be shocked if DJ Glaze doesn't remain the starter. He's shown some real potential, and potential only gets better with time. This could be a big year for him, and it'll be exciting to see how he performs in year 2. Then there's Tyree Wilson. His rookie season didn't blow anyone away, but he was always seen as a developmental prospect. The Raiders will give him another year to prove himself, and if he takes a step forward, he could make a significant impact. When it comes to linebackers and safeties, the Raiders have some solid options. Demetrius Knight Jr. is likely going to be one of the first linebackers off the board, but there's also Carson Swinsinger from UCLA, who's another name to watch. While linebacker isn't often prioritized in the first round, you can find hidden gems later on. For instance, Jade Campbell, taken by the Eagles at pick 31, had a solid college career but isn't always considered a high-value position. What's interesting here is how successful Bill Belichick has been in finding elite talent at linebacker and safety, often with low draft picks. This shows that linebackers and safeties can be system players, players who thrive in the right environment. While Malachi Starks is the only safety taken in the early rounds, the Raiders might find someone to replace Trayvon Mullen. If the Raiders look for a safety in the draft, Nick Anwaru is someone to keep an eye on. At 6 feet 0 inches and running a 4.38-second 40-yard dash, he's an athlete with speed and upside. He might not have the build of a traditional post safety, but his athleticism could make him a versatile player in the secondary. The Raiders are in a great position. They've made some strong moves already, but day 2 of the draft is when they can really capitalize. The team has made strides, and with solid picks they can continue building a competitive roster.